Okay, we're ready to go. Welcome to From a Distance. If you are an 80s kid, you have that song stuck in your head and have ever since you heard about this session. So thanks for joining me. We are in some crazy times right now. We've got the ability to reach out to people in ways that we never thought we were going to need. And many of us find ourselves in situations where we are leading training sessions and meetings and delivering information virtually. I think webinars have kind of gotten a bad rap for years because webinars tend to make us feel like they're going to be boring and annoying. So I'm going to give you some tips today on how to not just deliver information in a way that can be fun, entertaining, and educational at the same time, but also help you feel a little more comfortable doing virtual training sessions. I know when I first started doing them many years ago, the first couple of times I felt nervous. You can't necessarily see people's faces. You can't necessarily get their instant feedback. You don't hear them laugh when you tell jokes. And so it can be a little bit intimidating to get started when you are doing online sessions. So I'm going to give you 8 tips today to make your sessions a little bit easier and better and more comfortable. Now, as we get started, I am going to let you know I am recording this session. And so if you are here, you will have the ability to have this recorded as well as all of the information that you're seeing on the screen. So I want to make sure that you feel comfortable just sitting back, taking notes if you want, watching, and I'll make sure you get everything at the end. All right, so to get started, I've listed a whole bunch of tools here for you. There are lots of options when you're doing online training or meetings. Right now, you're obviously using Zoom, and that's a really common one. It's also free. If it's a limited free, so there's another price if you want some more options. So if you just want the really basic, get a couple of people and have them on the screen or have them participate in a meeting, Zoom is a great option. You have GoToMeeting or GoToWebinar. Facebook Live is a good option right now because you can go live to nobody without an audience and record that session and then make it available afterwards, or you can invite people to join in. You can also do Facebook Lives in just particular groups, so that just gives you some more control. You have Livestorm. Be Live gives you an option to schedule your Facebook Lives and invite people to attend. You can do Instagram Lives or use Instagram TV. There are Google Hangouts. Google Hangouts are still a thing. Blue Jeans is a great option. Microsoft Teams, if you're looking for some bigger, more robust options. Skype, still around, still very functional, and Adobe Connect is also an option. So you've got lots of options if you're looking for something that accommodates a lot of people or just a few. But my suggestion is pick one and just play with it. Invite one person or just do a Zoom call for just yourself without any participants. And that gives you the ability to sort of start to feel it out. All right, tip number 1, prepare. First of all, the question you should ask yourself is, who is your audience? If you are creating these videos or these meetings or these sessions and you're just kind of saying, hey, anybody who's joining, it's going to be really hard for you to drill down on the content that you think is going to be most valuable. So first question is identify who is your audience and what do they need most. So when I advertised this session, the first thing I said is, if you're a broker or a manager or someone who has to run meetings or is sharing information with a bunch of people, this is what's going to help you. So identify who that is so people don't get on the call who you don't want there, who are asking questions that particularly aren't going to pertain to your content. My best advice for when you're preparing is, what is the smallest piece? And what I mean by that is, how can you break down your information into the smallest pieces possible? Because remember, you have a short attention span. You have a short amount of time or a limited amount of time. Hopefully none of you are doing endless webinars or virtual meetings that just never have an end time. So what is that smallest piece of information that you can get across to people in that amount of time? And start by preparing knowing what that is. So today I prepared for you 8 tips, and those are the smallest pieces that I could break this into. So make sure that you do that. Otherwise, you're going to end up rambling and you're going to end up trying to cram too much information in, and you're not really going to have a point. So understanding what that smallest piece is. And then I recommend that you practice. So do a run through. If you're doing your first Facebook Live, again, do a Facebook Live to nobody. If you're doing a Zoom call, just invite one person on and get comfortable with the tools. Sometimes they can change based on the device that you're using. You want to set up all of your settings in the background before you get started so you understand, hey, Do I have people muted when they join? What have I enabled? Am I going to be able to record it, etc.? And if you're incorporating videos, make sure you test your videos first, because you need to have those embedded, or you need to have those ready to go on your desktop, or on the device that you're using, because there's nothing more embarrassing than saying, I'm going to just show you this quick video, and then it doesn't, and then everything crashes. So prepare, very first thing that you should be doing. Number two, as you're preparing to do some online training or run meetings online, is plan for technical difficulties. The stories I could tell you of the things that have gone wrong on the sessions that I have done over the years, I mean, pretty much everything can and will go wrong. So just plan for that. Have a separate device ready to go. So I have my phone here today. If this was to crash, I could jump on my phone. Um, Plan for your cat screaming at you throughout the session, or remember the guy who was doing the video and the little kid walked in, and plan for that stuff and be able to roll with it. So what I am telling you is you aren't going to be able to control everything, but what you can do is control how you react to it. So if, for instance, right now my cat decides to jump on my lap and decide to start freaking out, we're going to laugh about it, because there's nothing we can do. So plan to roll with stuff that goes wrong. If you have a lot of people that are in your chat box and are saying, I can't see the screen, or I don't know what I'm doing, or I don't know how to ask a question, find ways to not get distracted with that. Tell people what you're going to do ahead of time with questions and chats. And don't get distracted with that, because a lot of times other people in the chat box will be able to jump in and help them. One other thing that I can really recommend, especially if you're doing a session for a whole bunch of people, is get help. Have somebody that's also on the call, that has the ability to either monitor the chat, respond to questions, or be there as a backup with your information or your slide deck or your videos. So just in case, you could say, hey, I'm going to hand this over to this person, and they're going to jump on there and they're going to show this video. So having that backup person is really, really helpful. Number three, third tip, is visuals. So one thing that can be really difficult when you are doing a session, if you don't have any visuals, is they're just staring at your face. And also, what's really difficult is you're staring at your face, and we tend to be really critical of ourselves when we're staring at ourselves in the face. So I would recommend that you have some sort of visuals or images or props that you can use. Usually your first question is, am I going to show my face, or am I going to show my screen? Yes, you should show your face as much as possible. We are all going to be critical. Right now you're seeing my kitchen, and well, it's actually my grandmother's kitchen, and I could be thinking, oh, my kitchen's a mess, whatever. You've got to roll with those things. But if you can show your face and let people see that you're a human being, that's always going to make your presentations and your meetings a whole lot more engaging. If you don't have any slides or any images that you want to show, and it's a smaller group, let everybody else show their face too. You may have 15, 20 people on the call, and being able to see their faces and their facial expressions is really going to help you. So those of you that are doing, say, your morning meetings right now, or your team meetings by Zoom, for social distancing, and we're not all in the same place, it allows us to see each other's faces, and that's really good. You may have props, you may have images, have those prepared on your desktop. One thing I will recommend if you are going to screen share is have what you're going to show ready to go on your screen, and also maybe clean your desktop off a little bit. Before before you show your desktop, if you go to screen share, I saw someone on Twitter this morning say that they're having a remote call with a colleague, and they got to see some folders that were labeled some really embarrassing things on that person's desktop. So just know, maybe clean your desktop off, or have things ready to screen share before you start your meeting. That will help you to avoid some of those issues. Now, if you are going to do slides or visuals like you're seeing on the screen right now, a couple of things that I would recommend. If you're going to use images, I always recommend big photos and big words. I'm kind of breaking my rule today by putting words on the screen. I don't normally do stuff where there's a whole bunch of words, but I'm going to make this available to you as notes afterwards. So I wanted you to have those notes. But typically I would say big photos and big words. And that allows you to not only make it interesting and visual, but also it's easy to read, especially for people who might be following along on a phone or a mobile device where the screen, excuse me, where the screen is smaller. One thing I definitely recommend is lots of white space. So we tend as humans to cram as much stuff in as possible to try and fill up the space. And we do that with marketing and we do that with all kinds of stuff, but less is more when you're looking at your screen. You want people to focus on the stuff that's most important. So make sure that there's some white space, even if that means you need to space yourself stuff out. Also, don't do this. Oh my God, I've seen so many slides or images where it's just like just overwhelming amount of information and nobody knows where to look, and people read at different paces, and also when they're reading they're not paying attention to you. So what they're doing is they're focusing on what's there as opposed to listening to your voice. So don't do that. Fourth tip that I have for you today is collateral. It's really helpful that people have something that they can either physically hold or they can download. So if you're doing training and you have some worksheets or a workbook, or even if you're doing screen shares, um, take some screenshots of that before and make it something that they can either download during the session or afterwards so they can physically hold it. A lot of people still really like those like physical touch, give me a paper, give me a handout, let me have something. So that's really helpful if you especially are, again, like me, showing a bunch of information today, telling them, hey, afterwards, you're going to be able to download all of this. So you will physically be able to have this. Also, if you have notes, or if you have, say, an outline of notes on the session that you're delivering or the information that you're delivering, making sure that that's something that you can make available to them. And again, if you're using slides like I am today, having those available afterwards. Plan for the end when you're doing a training session or a meeting, because at the end, the very last question that you will get from everyone is, how can I get a copy of this? It's inevitable, no matter whether you're doing it online or in person. So plan for that and start out at the beginning by saying, hey, I'm going to record this and I'm going to give you a copy of this, or I'm not, and this is where you're going to be able to go and get it. But either way, make sure that you let them know what you're going to do at the end. Fifth tip for you today is clarity. So one thing I would definitely recommend is pace yourself. I tend to talk really quickly. And I also know that I have a very limited time frame where I have people that are going to pay attention and be able to be here. And our attention spans are actually quite a bit shorter when we're taking virtual sessions. And the reason for that is because we're so used to multitasking. And so we're used to being on our phones and watching TV and listening to something else and talking to people. And so we tend to get a little bit more distracted when no one's paying attention to whether we're paying attention. And so we have to be really clear in our online sessions, especially if we can't see everybody's faces. So pace yourself, meaning don't talk too fast, but also don't take too long to get to the point, because after a while people will be like, forget this. So you've got to make sure you keep it moving, get them good information in a really evenly paced pace. Also, don't be afraid to sort of show and tell people something. You have a video camera on you, so use your body language, smile. If you can stand up and walk around, if you have a camera that is panning wide enough that you can use a whiteboard, that's great. But remember, your whiteboard may show up in reverse. So that might be a little bit awkward. So that's in practice, make sure that you understand how that stuff's going to come across. If I wanted to hold up a piece of paper right now and show you something, remember that that may come across in reverse. So just kind of keep that in mind when you're doing props and showing and telling. But make sure that if you do have that camera on you, that you let people know, like, I'm here, I'm human. What's really boring is like if I'm doing the nightly news and I'm super serious and I'm sitting here staring at the camera and reading information to you. That's not a great way to engage when you've got people only watching you on a little tiny screen. Repetition is also super important. Now, repetition is important in training in general, but definitely is more important when you're not in front of people. So you'll see if you go back and watch this that I've repeated myself a few times, and you just get better at doing that as you practice. But the reason why you want to repeat yourself is because, again, we do get distracted. Our attention spans are a little bit shorter, and we want to make sure that they get the point as we go along. So having that pacing, showing people what's going on, and repeating that on a regular basis. All right, let's get to the meat of this content. So tip number 6 is always remember what are the smallest pieces. So whether you're doing a session on what's going on right now, what do you need to do right now, or you're training on a particular piece of software, or you're just giving people information, or you're teaching them how to fill in a form. Remember what is the smallest piece. So what is the one thing you want them to take away and do, and what is the next thing you want them to do after that? Being able to break down steps and then next steps is really, really important, not just in education, but in particular in virtual education, because people aren't going to necessarily remember everything you said, but they will remember what you said to do now and what to do next. Also remember as you're creating content that less is more. If you are talking and you are taking questions and you're allowing other people to ask questions and talk, remember that time is going to go a lot faster than you think. And so less content is more. Don't feel like you need to have, 60 graphs or slides or, 800 pieces of information. You're not going to get through all that. You're going to get to that period of time where you think, oh my gosh, I'm running out of time. And then you're just going to be flipping through stuff. People are going to be frustrated. Less is definitely more in this situation. And then the two most important E's, the smallest pieces that I want you to remember from this particular session, are educate and entertain. So education is key. You want people to take a piece of information away and do something with it, but it also has to be entertaining. It has to be fun. Fun isn't always Fun isn't always going to happen when you're training on forms or you're teaching people stuff that's really difficult or maybe even frustrating. But fun can be, hey guys, we've got this. It can be your tone. It can be the smile you have on your face. It can be the fact that you use a picture of a dog at the end, whatever it is. But find a way to make it human. And I think maybe human is a better word than entertain, but find a way to make it both educational and human. And definitely avoid the ramble. This is where we all get a little bit stuck when you get nervous. And we do get nervous more often when we're delivering to a camera than to an actual human, because we get the feedback from them and we get their facial expressions, and we tend to ramble when we get nervous. So again, avoid the ramble by breaking things down into small pieces and keeping it moving for yourself as well. I could have made this the 4 points or the 4 tips for really good online education. But the reality is that if I break it up into 8, it's smaller pieces and it keeps me moving. So speaking of that, let's move on to number 7, questions. How do you take questions? This is one of the most challenging pieces of doing online or virtual sessions, is that you have questions. Right now, I have a blinking orange box at the top of the screen that's telling me that some of you have added stuff into the chat box. Now, I have a choice as I'm doing this session to pause and look at that chat box now, or not to pause and continue through and take questions at the end. Now, in this case, I'm going to take questions at the end. And I'm going to allow people to log off if they don't want to stay for the questions or to participate. And the reason why I'm choosing to do that is because I made this a really limited time. I only wanted this to be a really short session. And so if I start taking questions now, we may go down a rabbit hole. But if I don't take questions and I don't tell people that I'm not going to take questions, then the question box just keeps blinking at me. So know what you're going to do in advance and tell people in advance, I'm going to record, I'm not going to record. You're going to get a copy of this, you're not, and I'm going to take Q&A at the end. This is also where it's a really good opportunity for you to have some help. So say that I had asked another person to sort of compile the good questions as we went along. At the end, I could unmute that person and say, hey, friend, what are some of the questions we have? And that friend could say, hey, here was a really good one. So they've already kept me from having to read through all the questions, and they avoid that awkward pause of me going, no, that's not a good one. Oh, I'm going to avoid that. That's just somebody saying hi, etc. Okay. So having help in that regard can be really, really helpful. You want to keep it flowing. If you do take questions, if you do stop and read the chat box, you want to make sure that you don't go down that rabbit hole and you don't allow somebody to continue to just I've had people come into the chat box and be like, well, what do you think? No, you didn't answer the question. Tell me again. And asking questions that are totally irrelevant to the content. And that frustrates everyone else, but it also frustrates you, and that tends to show. So if you do take questions or you do look at that chat box, keep it flowing. Or have a designated time where you stop and you take questions and you get through them and then you keep going. But make sure you allow for time for that. And lastly, always tell people we can take this offline. That's one of the best and easiest ways to handle those questions that might do the rabbit hole. Just sort of say to somebody, hey, you know what? I'd love for you to reach out to me afterwards. I'm going to give you my contact information. Let's take that question offline, and then just keep going. And that allows you to control the flow, but also make people feel like they've been heard. Number 8, last tip that I have for you today is follow up. Probably one of the most important parts of doing any educational session, whether it's virtual or in person, is leaving people with a sense of what do I do next? We can call that a call to action or whatever you want, but ultimately we have to give people some direction about where do they go next. And then we need to answer the questions they'll inevitably have after they say, what do I do next? Which are, what will I need to do that? Where will I be able to find that information? And how can you help me? And those are some of the most common questions that any educator or leader or broker or business person gets when they're disseminating information to somebody is, okay, so what do I do now? What do I need to do that? Where will I find that? And how can you help me? So make sure you plan for those things. Make sure that you plan to wrap things up with, here's what you should do next. So I'm going to answer these questions for you today. If you are going to run some online education sessions for your people or start doing some virtual meetings, the first thing you want to do is get really comfortable with a tool, whether it's Zoom or Facebook Live or whatever it is. Some of the best ways for you to do that is practice. Grab somebody else and say, let's practice together. What are you going to need for that? You're going to need a tool, and you're going to need to answer those questions in the beginning of who's my audience and what information do they need. Where can you find that information? I'm going to give you a copy of all of this so you have it to review, and also you can contact me if you have questions. I'm always happy to help. So I'm going to load this recording as well as a copy of all of these slides onto a blog post that will go live here in probably the next 20 minutes. So you will have a copy of all of this if you'd like to review it, you'd like to look at it, or maybe you want to share the slides and share this presentation with other people in your leadership team or your group or people, or just have them as notes to review. But before we do that, I'm going to take some Q&A. So I'm going to go into the chat box and I'm going to see who's there and any questions that we've gotten. Now's the time if you want to jump in that chat box. If you have questions, if there's anything that you want to discuss. So good question is, you seem to have a microphone. So what are my recommendations on that? Really good question. I'm actually using my microphone that's connected to my ear pods that I use on my telephone. So I use it on my cell phone. So it's just literally, you could use the one from your iPhone that has your microphone on it, or this is just a $20 one that I bought in the airport after I lost my one that came with my iPhone. So this is just, it has the microphone built in. And what's nice about this is it hangs sort of by your face. It's super easy. You can still use your hands. So this is my favorite thing to use because it's cheap and it's easy. I also have a snowball microphone, which is on a stand, and that's about $45 on Amazon. And it's just a blue snowball. It's just a round circle that stands on a stand. And if you're going to be doing a lot of video, sometimes that's nice to have as well because it's a really crisp sound. And what's nice is that closes out sound from around the room. All right, so other questions. Where can I find this recorded link? You're going to have that on my blog. So just go to valeriegarcia.com/blog. Any other questions anybody else might have? Okay, so you've gotten a pretty good example of how this goes today. You log in, you take questions, you prep them, you tell them what's going to happen, you give out your information, and then you tell them where to go next. So that being said, my contact information is on the screen. I'm always available to help. We are in this crazy time where we've got a lot of things that we have to kind of change up, and we have to start doing maybe listing presentations this way, or maybe our agents are going to have to start doing listing presentations this way. So we want them to get a little more comfortable with how this goes. So happy to help. You let me know how I can help. And hey, I am I am off the road and off the payroll. So I have my Venmo at the bottom of this. So if you feel like donating a few bucks, thanking me for this information, um, shameless plug for that there. All right. So have a great day. Happy to help. Hope this helped everyone. Thanks for the everyone jumping into the chat box, and we'll talk soon.